This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo, giving you the inside track on all the big talking points from Anfield.
Hello and welcome to this week's Liverpool.com podcast. I'm your host, Matt Addison. Richard Garnett is alongside me. We're going to have a chat about a few things Liverpool related after a couple of tricky games for Liverpool, defeats at Crystal Palace, Galatasaray and Chelsea. And it means that Liverpool boss Arne Slot has quite a few things to think about during this international break. Myself and Rich are going to go through and give our take on each of the things that needs to change and what we think is the best way of solving those things. But before we get into today's episode, a word for our sponsors, NordVPN. They've got the new app available to download, which gives you a reliable and affordable internet access on your trip abroad. Saily is a new eSIM service app. It's brought to you by the creators of NordVPN. You can choose from several eSIM data plans in over 200 destinations. And with Saily's eSIM, you'll always have a connection when you need one. You can download Saily in your app store. And of course, you can use our code BLOODRED at checkout to get an exclusive 15% off your first purchase. For more information on that, you can go to the episode description box below for further details, or you can go direct to saily.com/bloodred. But Rich, without further ado, let's get into it. It's not been the best time for Liverpool, has it? It was a difficult 8 days. We hope that they can bounce back against Manchester United, but bigger picture to start with. What have you made of Liverpool so far this season? Do you think the 3 defeats were a surprise, or were they something that you maybe saw coming?
Oh, dear. Well, I think it was a surprise that they had 3 consecutive defeats. But the fact that they've had some defeats is probably not a surprise, especially given the nature of the previous victories, which had all appeared to be achieved by the skin of their teeth. Obviously, any team's going to be happy with a perfect start in terms of points return. And Liverpool were able to deliver that as defending champions and, got off to a good start in the Champions League as well, albeit with another late winner. So plenty of drama, plenty of excitement. But even before the defeats started, obviously alarm bells were ringing a little bit because the Reds haven't looked as tight as a unit. They certainly defensively, they've been a little bit all over the shop. And that midfield, that was sort of the bedrock of last year's success, appears to have gone to the wall. So, yeah, there's been a lot of changes, and I feel like maybe we got away with it for a few weeks. And I always thought that Crystal Palace game was going to be a really difficult one. I think a draw there would have been a fairly, a good result, an acceptable result. So it was disappointing to concede a late goal, as is exactly the same with Chelsea. You know what I mean? A point on the road at either of those clubs is no disgrace, but for whatever reason, we've not been able to see the game out. And after a run of games of scoring late winners, to concede late goals to lose is obviously a bit of a cause for concern.
Yeah, it does feel like a bit of a role reversal, doesn't it? It's, I think, slightly unfortunate for Liverpool as well, in that I think the goal came in, the 97th, 98th minute in the Palace game, 95th against Chelsea. You just think if they could have just held on for a few extra seconds, it would be probably, to be honest, a completely different podcast. We probably wouldn't be sat here going through each of the things that have gone wrong, even though, obviously, separate from the results, those things are kind of underlying and still there. So let's get into the first one then. I want to touch on Mohamed Salah to start with. Obviously, we've seen a difficult-ish start for him, really. He scored 3 goals so far. I think 2 of those have been penalties, but it sort of feels to me a bit like the emphasis in Liverpool's attack has been shifted a little bit away from him. He feels a little bit more isolated. There's been a bit of chat as well about him potentially missing Trent Alexander-Arnold behind him. Are you worried about Mohamed Salah? What do you sort of put it down to so far? The fact that he's obviously not scoring goals, but he's probably not had as many chances or as many opportunities to do so as probably Liverpool would have wanted.
Yeah, well, as we said, there's been a lot of change in personnel, and a lot of these players are still learning what the real, intricate strengths and weaknesses of Mohamed Salah are when they're playing with him on the same pitch. So I would agree that he definitely feel like the sort of emphasis of putting everything through him has definitely sort of waned away. The first time I spotted that was actually at Wembley at the Charity Shield. Straight off, I noticed that Liverpool made a pretty decent start in that game, but and obviously things didn't quite go to plan as that game wore on. But I did feel like even from the off there, he wasn't as involved in matches as maybe he would have liked to be. And don't get me wrong, he's not always got the ball at his feet. You know what I mean? He can have quiet periods in games, but will always pop up with a goal and an assist. That's why he's got the records that he has. But I think these new players that have come in are still yet to sort of figure out how they should be getting the best out of what is Liverpool's attacking talisman. And maybe the manager is as well, in terms of, what he's actually telling the new players and the system in which he's trying to implement. What I would say, though, is although Salah's had less of the ball, my sort of question would be who's had more of it, who has actually replaced him. And it's not like, obviously, Isak has still only been sporadically involved, although he has obviously had a couple of starts now in the Premier League. I don't, Cody Gakpo's seen plenty of the ball, but it is perhaps not as threatening as Salah is on the other side. So it's almost like, although he's been maybe marginalised a little bit, they haven't really, it's not actually been because someone else has benefited. The only person who's obviously looked really good, I think, has been Ekitike, who then managed to get himself sent off for a 1-yard tap-in the Carabao Cup, which took him out of a team just when we least needed it. So it's there's a bit of a puzzle to be unravelled there. I don't think it should be that difficult for the manager, though. Look, if you look at, if he analyses where Liverpool's goals came from last season and how many chances were created by Salah, then all you really need to do is try and recreate that, but with different players on the pitch. How hard can it be to do that? I don't know. Arne Slot can tell me that. But I think one thing I will say, I did say last season, as soon as Salah signed that new contract, I did feel like it was the beginning of the end for Salah in terms of he was going to be replaced. They were going to look to basically had a 2-year window where they could look to replace that attacking goals and the goal supply that has been relied on for so many years. They've signed Ekitike, they've signed Isak, they've signed Wirtz. These are players who are expected to pick up the mantle and take that on from Salah. And I do think over a period of time his role will diminish, but that doesn't change the fact that at the moment he plays every game and he probably doesn't see enough of the ball or isn't doing enough with it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think definitely the Isak and Wirtz signings feel like they're sort of almost, if not next summer, then the one after, if Salah was to move on. There, the sort of shift in emphasis, maybe that has sort of come a little bit quicker than what we thought. Maybe that's premature at the start of this season. He's obviously not playing well, but there were still chances. I mean, Wirtz, as soon as he came on, did that lovely backheel flick into his path. And if Salah scores that, maybe, again, similar to sort of generally with Liverpool, maybe the narrative is a little bit different. Maybe we're talking about slightly different things as well. Just before we move on from Salah, I wanted to mention the chat around sort of not tracking back. I think that's a bit of a theme of the last few days, really. People have kind of pointed to that. I saw on Match of the Day, I think it was on Sky's coverage of the game as well, that they kind of spoke about him maybe not doing enough to help out at right back. But I just can't really see that myself. I mean, he wasn't doing it last season and it wasn't a problem then. So I'm not really too sure whether that is something that I would blame him for. I think that the worry for me isn't in any way him being lazy. I think that's a crazy accusation to level at a player who clearly is very dedicated to his craft and does all of the hard work and puts in the hard yards. The issue for me is just that he's not taking those chances. He doesn't seem as confident in front of goal. As soon as that changes and as soon as that flips, and you have to have hope that will happen at some point sooner rather than later. I think he's not become a bad player overnight, and if he is still getting those chances, then eventually they will find the back of the net. To me, It just feels it feels wrong to point at him tactically doing something wrong when A, it's not him deciding those tactics, and B, it worked so well last season anyway.
Well, first off, he's not immune from criticism, is he? he's in that side because of the numbers that he's delivered consistently for years. And if the standards that he's set for himself dip, then, people will start to point the finger or try and work out why you're not getting the return out of him that we've just become accustomed to for so long. I haven't got a massive issue around the whole tracking back thing. I know we're going to talk about the right back situation a little bit down the tracks here, but he's not had the sort of same cover behind him as he's enjoyed previously, and that's probably just been a bit more exploited. And I do think teams this year as well have kind of cottoned on to that as well and tried to, getting behind down the flanks for Liverpool and took advantage of situations where they can just take players out of the equation. Not just Salah, but whoever's playing right back as well. And Liverpool have had more right backs so far this season than I was probably anticipating. I don't think we're done in the experiment area of that either. So, I'm not too overly concerned about the tracking back. I think there are other players in the team that I think can maybe pull the weight a little bit more in that respect. I'll touch on that shortly as well. But I just think, Salah's always been a little bit of an unorthodox player. I think he's sort of played his own game. His numbers speak for himself, so there's no disputing what he's achieved and the levels he's achieved. He misses his fair share. He always has done. Sometimes he doesn't always play the right ball, but will then deliver one that gives you a goal. So you do get a bit of a mixed bag with Salah, and I think you always had. But the fact is he's been so consistent for so long is why he's been able to deliver the numbers that he's had. And unfortunately, just a little bit of a dip at the moment. And as I said, there's other people on the pitch, so that probably had an effect. But I'm not overly concerned about sort of the work rate thing at the moment.
No, I think that is something that we'll see change as well. It only takes one goal for suddenly the confidence to look different. Suddenly the players around him look a little bit better as well. If he
100%.
If he scores and, he's set up by Isak or he's set up by Wirtz, it can change them and that has a knock-on effect as well. But we've both mentioned the right-back situation. We might as well do that next, given that we've mentioned it. Obviously, Bradley, Frimpong and Szoboszlai we've seen there. I'm pretty sure at some point we'll see Joe Gomez there as well. We maybe see another midfielder. Curtis Jones has played there. Maybe Wataru Endo as well. I mean, there's no shortage of options, but it just isn't quite working out the way it's meant to at the moment, is it?
Well, there's no shortage of options, but the ones that you've mentioned there are hardly ideal, are they? Bear in mind that these right backs, the first choice right backs, shall we say, are not injured. That they're available, and yet Arne Slot is having a right old tinker at right back. He's obviously not happy with what he's seeing. I don't really blame him. I am a big Conor Bradley fan. I have bigged him up on Blood Red a number of times. I've even labelled him a potential future captain because I think he's got the right characteristics to do that. But he's not made a great start to the season. And that is going to be a source of disappointment for Slot, I think, because he's had to take him off in 2 games for the good of the side. That's disrupted the flow there. Szoboszlai has gone in at right back and done a good job when required, but he's not a right back. And due to other issues in midfield, they're missing his energy in midfield when he's playing in that position. So I don't see that as any sort of long-term solution. Plus, he signed a right back in the summer who were talking about potentially playing further up the pitch, replacing Salah when Salah goes to the Africa Cup of Nations later in the season. We don't need to worry about that at the moment. We need to worry about the fundamentals of playing well at right back. Frimpong is obviously what I'm talking about, and he's not covered himself in glory, has he? I don't think. Having said that, I don't think Kerkez at left back has either. I don't know if it's concentration or the way Liverpool set up, which is allowing teams to get in round the back, but that position should be. I feel like it should be a lot more solid than it has been, and even if Frimpong wasn't necessarily the first choice, even though he was brought in the summer, Bradley hasn't really grasped that chance yet to nail that down and make that position his own. I think he needs to. He needs to look at the example of Andy Robertson, and see a player who, let's not forget, when he brought in, didn't go into the side immediately, was given a period of adaptation, and then eventually displaced. I think it was Albert Moreno, was it, a left back at the time, and made that position his own for many years to come. And that's really got to be the mindset of Bradley. So I don't know if he needs to speak to Robertson or what he needs to do just to try and knuckle down and try and avoid some yellow cards for starters and just play a bit of a safer game. It's a tricky one. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to disagree with any of that, isn't it? I think Bradley's been pretty poor, actually, the last couple of games. He's come off at half-time in both games, hasn't he, I think? And obviously hasn't had the easiest start. He had an injury and has been disrupted, so he's maybe still getting himself back up to full fitness. And again, I know we keep saying that there's been lots of changes within the Liverpool team, but that probably doesn't help either if you're a right back. And obviously, it's a different dynamic. Obviously, Trent Alexander-Arnold was the number one last season, and he came in at times, but he wasn't playing 3 times a week. He wasn't starting every single game. Obviously, Trent had an injury at certain points, and there was a bit more of a pressure on his shoulders to take that responsibility and make that position his own. But it is a slightly different dynamic when you're the one who the manager is probably looking at and thinking, if he has 2 or 3 good games, then he's the number one on the team sheet. That's a bit different to sort of popping in for half an hour here and there, or the odd game here and there, and knowing that, you don't have to necessarily put a run of games together. He is still obviously a very young player, still a lot of development to do. I think there's clearly a lot of talent there. Like you say, he's a very good player. He's just got to take that next step. Unfortunately for Conor Bradley, he's got to take that next step at the same time that Kirkes has got to, Ibrahim Konate has got to, a couple of the midfielders have got to as well. There's quite a lot of players in that kind of, we know what they can do, but they haven't quite done it yet kind of category. So it's tricky, isn't it? I mean, I did have reservations about Jeremy Frimpong as well. It's far too early to be writing him off, and I'm not by any stretch of the imagination doing that, but he was a wing back. He was a player who was basically more of a Mohamed Salah type player than a proper right back, if you want to call it that. Now, there will be games where that suits Liverpool to have a player who is much more attack-minded, but I did wonder how that might work for him coming into a Liverpool team and playing in a back four. That isn't really something that we've seen from him too often this season. So, yeah, there's definitely a few question marks there. I'm not quite sure what the answer is, but...
Well, let's just... I think... I feel like we've already seen enough to suggest that Slot prefers Bradley over Frimpong for that position. I don't see that changing. I think he'll probably have frank conversations with Bradley, and I'm sure he'll try and sort of pick up on that. But, just in terms of like Trent not being there anymore, and Trent was there last season, but Bradley played 29 games. He played 19 Premier League matches, 29 in total. So it's not like he hasn't been a bit part player, has he? Trent had injuries and other stuff going on. And so he played plenty last season and impressed. So he just needs to pick that up again, doesn't he? And I'm not quite sure what the issue is there, but I'm confident that can be resolved because I think he's a good defender.
I think he's probably just young enough that you have those periods when you're 21, 22 as a footballer. You're not necessarily consistent all the way through. I think we've seen that with lots of players over the course of the years. I mean, even if you look at Chelsea now, there's lots of players in that age bracket where you think probably the reason they're not going to go on and win the title is because there will be inconsistencies. They will have good games as they did against Liverpool. They'll have bad games as well. I just wonder whether Conor Bradley maybe just fits into that category at the moment. But someone who should be heading out of that period of his career and into the best years of his career, Ibrahim Konate. Let's talk a little bit about him as well, because, I mean, the situation with Mark Gay, we know what happened there and why that didn't happen. It's far too easy, I think, to say, well, Liverpool should have done more or whatever it might be to get that deal over the line. But it does feel a little bit costly to me that they didn't manage to do that, whether that was their fault or Crystal Palace's or whatever it might be, wherever the blame may lie for that. The centre-back situation at the moment seems a little bit all over the place as well, which, to be fair, probably doesn't help the right-backs either.
or the left back.
Or the left back. Or the midfield.
Basically all the positions. God, what's going on there? What is going on there? I don't know. Obviously, not getting in the Crystal Palace captain on deadline day has proven to be a bit of a problem, because it goes without saying that if they had made that sign or completed that signing, I don't think Canate would be starting at the moment. I think that's a bit of a cert. I don't know why. I don't know if it's lack of concentration or whatever, but he's just doesn't look as focused and as assured as we've been used to seeing him in the past. My son's a massive fan of Canate, and he's not really happy with what he's seeing. One of his favourite players, you know what I mean? And I think when young people, and not just young people actually, but fans in general, sometimes when they take to players, particularly with defenders, it's because they're so dominant and they feel safe with them in a back line. It's that sort of sense of security, something we've got from Virgil van Dijk for pretty much the majority of his career, and I felt like we had that with Canate, and that it's just like evaporated. And I don't know whether it's something to do with the fact that he knows that Liverpool tried to bring another player in who would probably replace him, or the fact that there is plenty of rumours about him potentially moving on, maybe to Real Madrid at the end of the season when his contract runs out. And these things can be a bit of a distraction, perhaps. But the fact of the matter is, he's a Liverpool player now, and not really playing to the level that we expect. I think one thing that sort of frustrates me even more is the amount of time that he's dwelling on the ball as well. When we've got it at the back, it's just not moving the ball quick enough or transitioning up the pitch. And I think that is costing Liverpool, let alone, giving the ball away or, misjudging high balls or whatever. Just that sort of dawdling on the ball when we need to get on the front foot is definitely holding us back. So there's not too much you can do about it other than decide to play Joe Gomez. I've seen suggestions about Endo, Andy Robertson, Gravenberch playing there. None of those are good answers. These are these are midfielders. These are not people who should be playing centre back when you've got a French international there. So maybe the international break is perhaps coming at a good time and will give Liverpool a bit of a chance to reset and for Arne Slot to have frank conversations with some of these players who just aren't performing to the levels that we know that they're capable of. And I guess the sort of response he gets from that will determine whether he continues with what he's got at the back or makes a change. He's been hamstrung by the fact that his young centre back Giovanni Leone is now out for the season. That's obviously a disaster, because he although he obviously got his what turned out to be a disappointing debut for him. I think perhaps he may have had designs on him being more involved earlier than we perhaps first anticipated, but obviously that's no longer possible. So Canate is going to have to improve. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, it's the in-possession stuff, isn't it, really? It's giving the ball away. It's taking too long to make those passes. It's just lack of concentration, really, which for a 26-year-old player you wouldn't have thought would be an issue. It seems to have got worse when it's at that point in his career. I mean, that's the age that Virgil van Dijk was when he came to Liverpool and took that next step. He should be in the portion of his career where those lapses are not there anymore. He goes up another level and really becomes a lot more confident. But I thought it was really telling, actually, that I know he got the little knock, and Arne Slot said that was part of the reason that he came off against Chelsea, but he also said he thought about making that substitution anyway because there just wasn't any progression with the ball. There was no passing. There was no kind of quality in there. He needed Ryan Gravenberch to drop in and do that for him, which, I mean, it's not a great sign if you need a midfielder to drop in and do the passing for you. It's just not viable to do that. Gravenberch obviously didn't have the greatest game against Chelsea, but he's had a good start to the season. You can't afford to not only play him out of position at centre-back and then be a little bit weaker, but then your midfield is weaker as well, which is not going to be ideal.
That feels a bit like sort of kids' football when you get the centre-back to take the goal kicks for the goalkeeper. You know what I mean? Yeah. He shouldn't have to do that job. I kind of get it if you want to get someone who's better on the ball to try and kickstart stuff. But as you say, I think it comes from a bit of a lack of confidence in the centre backs to do it. So, another thing to work on.
It gives me flashbacks of Fabinho and Henderson at centre back as well, which we don't need a situation like that again in the next few weeks.
No.
Talking of midfield, then let's finish with that, because that's been a talking point as well. There's been loads of talk about Florian Wirtz. I think that the criticism of him has been slightly harsh. I think the numbers could quite quickly come if the players around him start to finish those chances a little bit better. For me, at least, the bigger worry would be Alexis McAllister at the moment, because he just looks a million miles away from being fit and ready. The Liverpool midfield, frankly, was just bullied and dominated physically against Chelsea. I thought Moises Caicedo was excellent, but you'd expect Liverpool to be able to compete a little bit better in that department.
Yeah, this sort of is a big worry. Probably more than Wirtz is definitely the situation with McAllister, because of how integral he was to that midfield last season. What's really bugging me is that I don't understand what the actual problem is. No one's sort of been able to give me. Maybe it's another question for Arne Slot, in the press conferences, but there doesn't appear to be any clarity over exactly what his fitness issue is. I mean, is it really a fitness issue? I don't know. But we need Alexis McAllister firing on all cylinders. He's the glue in that midfield. And the poorer version of him is clearly to Liverpool's detriment at the moment. So I'd like to add more to that, but it's because I don't know exactly what the issue is with him. It's hard, isn't it?
It feels a little bit similar to Isak almost. I know obviously they were missing for different periods of time and for very different reasons, but he obviously had the injury, missed a bit of pre-season, and then has come back in and has just kind of played. But it's a bit of a chicken and egg thing, isn't it? Do you get that fitness by playing, but then by playing him, he doesn't play very well, and then it kind of just goes around in a bit of a vicious circle. At some point, he is going to have to play football matches. I almost wonder whether it'd be a good thing for him to get a couple of 90 minutes for Argentina this week. I'm not quite sure when they're playing, but he feels like he needs minutes. But then if you play him, then he's not playing very well, and you end up taking him off. So yeah, it just feels like you're going around in circles.
I mean, is it below him to maybe play some sort of like reserve matches? You know what I mean? Something, or behind closed doors sort of type situations to sort of try and iron out whatever those issues. I mean, I'm not being funny. Liverpool have got fitness experts coming out of their ears, haven't they? So, and it's pretty clear they're not telling us everything, which is fair enough. But they don't want to be, they don't want to show weakness to the opposition, do they? Especially with a player who's going to be considered a starter. But it's only going to, without stating obvious, it's only going to work continuing to sort of play through the issue if he can actually deliver on it. And in a way, if it takes a while to do it, other people are picking up the slack for him. Certainly can't afford to carry him. So, and that's another reason precisely why playing midfielders in defence is no real solution for Liverpool in trying to get back into winning ways, because if you're missing your main man in midfield, or he's not firing on all cylinders, then other people do need to take that slack. So, oh no, another issue, Matt. Nothing positive to say today. It all feels a bit negative, doesn't it?
It does, but the only thing I would say is I don't feel like any of these issues are unsolvable. I don't think it's a million miles away from Mohamed Salah scoring 4 goals in 5 games, or for Florian Wirtz suddenly to get a couple of assists, or Isak to suddenly look a bit fitter. You probably only have to solve 2 or 3 of these problems across the pitch, and suddenly Liverpool look a very, very different team. So that's the positive that I'm going to cling to.
Great. Well, one thing I can say, if you look at some of those wins they had at the start of the season, I think in the vast majority of them, there were games that should have been put to bed and weren't. Basically, we've let squandered leads and stuff like that. So it wasn't like Liverpool weren't scoring goals or weren't creating chances. The chances were there. They've got such a we've criticised a lot of players here today, and I guess some of this criticism was coming, wasn't it, after you lose 3 games on the bounce, which is pretty unprecedented for Liverpool these days. But that squad has got an absolute embarrassment of talent. There's so much quality there. It's untrue. So as you say, it's not going to take a whole deal to turn this around, is it? But obviously they've just gone a little bit off track. And I've said previously, I was worried about the number of players that have been brought in one go, and maybe a little bit of a bedding in situation that might not see everyone hit the ground running straight off. And that's certainly been the case for, at least 3 or 4 of the players there. So we need more Ekatiké's. That's what we need, Max.
Yeah,
and more. Get in there and take the bull by the horns.
2 Ekatiké's and 2 Dominic Szoboszlais, and Liverpool will be absolutely fine. But look, it was a bad week, but it's only about 2 weeks since Paul Merson said if Liverpool won against Crystal Palace and Arsenal lost against Newcastle, then the title race was already over. So things can change quickly, can't they? So,
a man of reason, Paul Merson, isn't he? He never says anything completely mad. But, there you go. Well in, Paul.
Yeah. Hey, things can change quickly in a couple of weeks' time. Maybe there'll be an equally bold shout, but the other way around. But anyway, let's leave it there for this week. We'll be back next week with the next Liverpool.com podcast. Thanks to Rich for joining me, and for you guys as well for listening and watching at home. We'll catch you next week here on the Blood Red channel.
This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo, giving you the inside track on all the big talking points from Anfield.